I usually have to send her a text to get her to the Environment and Policy Board, so I'll send her a text.
Okay, John, you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, and welcome everybody to the Village of New Paltz Planning Board regular meeting of Tuesday, October 6, 2020. Live stream recorded remotely at 7 p.m. The agenda tonight includes some administrative business, one public hearing, public comments, and application review. So with that in mind, did everyone get a chance to look at the September 15, 2020 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any modifications, any edits that we need to put in place? No? Okay. All right, then I would like to please get a motion to approve and accept the September 15, 2020 minutes. All in
So motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that has moved. Okay. Thank you. The next item on the administrative business is updates from Village Board, Ulster County Planning Board, and Environmental Planning Board. We see nothing, no one from the Village Board or from UCPB. So,
No, John,
Oh.
it's Will Murray. I'm here.
Oh, hey, Will, how you doing, man? Didn't see you on there.
Yeah, nice to see you, sir. Just a quick update. We're reviewing a short-term rental law, the Village Board. We've been knocking that around for a few weeks now.
You just cut out.
At our meetings. Am I okay now?
Okay.
And we just signed an agreement with Stewart's for the Broadhead property to take that on as a possible renovation for a home or a historic place. I was unable to attend I haven't been able to attend the Ulster County Planning Board meeting, which is tomorrow night.
Very good. Thank you. Any comments that you'd like to ask Will, or anything at all?
Well, I guess I will ask the question, what's going on with 21213?
21213.
I think he means 21223.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, the proposal, to change everything so that the building inspector has a lot more authority to give approval to projects without it having to come to the planning board.
Yeah, it's still under review.
But Bill, listen, you're a great guy. I mean, how long has it been under review?
Over 2 years.
Yeah, okay.
What was the original reason for it?
For the
Just
review of
bring-
21223?
No, yeah, what was the reason for reviewing it? Why did you want to allocate more authority to the building inspector rather than the planning board? That's what the purpose of it was?
Well, there are some things that are requiring the building inspector and the planning board, primarily the planning board, to approve things like fences that are going up. Someone wants to put a small shed for something, and those really are kind of onerous for the property owner to come to us and say, I want to put up a fence, and then have to go through the whole process. And it might be easier for the building inspector to say, yeah, you can put up a fence here, just as an example.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and that's the only reason. There's some very small things that got caught up in 21223 that they probably didn't intend to have caught up in 21223. So it's just giving authority to the building inspector to make some of those smaller calls, as opposed to having to go through the process of making an application, going through a public hearing, and then getting approval or disapproval for that. So that's the only reason.
In addition, it helps with expediting review and a refinement of the definitions within the code.
Hey, Bill, I had a question. Don here. There was also another plan to have the Historic Preservation Commission extend their authority to the whole village. Is that plan still active or moving forward?
Under discussion.
Don, also, I just want to clarify, they did come to the planning board and the discussion at the time was for an architectural review board, like to kind of create a whole other board, not necessarily extend the power of the Historic Preservation Commission now.
Clarification appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, so now, Don, if you would like to give us a bit of information on the environmental planning board updates, anything from that group, please.
I was on vacation during the last meeting. We're meeting next week, and one of the agenda items, I'm going to reprise the training that Rick gave to the planning board on seeker, using the Stewart's Project long EAF form as, or EIS form, pardon me, as an example. So we're going to talk that through, make sure that the EPB members are familiar with that and can start doing our job in terms of advising the planning board.
Very good, very good.
If you,
Okay.
Don, if you need any assistance, just let me know.
Thank you, Rick. I
Happy
took
to
many
help.
notes, but I will do that. Thank you.
Okay, so one of the things that we want to do is we want to welcome Rachel Agadka to the planning board. She's now a member of the planning board.
Thank you.
And Rachel, if you would like to take just a few minutes and give us a bit of your background, what caused your interest in the planning board?
Well, I've lived in the village for, I guess, over 20 years. I've seen things come and go. I've been on the environmental board since 2003 or 4. And I've thought about being on the planning board before, but you know, the objection to my joining the planning board was always, oh, they need you on the environmental board. But now, for the first time in as long as I can remember, we have enough members on the board and we have enough activity to keep going. So they don't need me anymore. So I also felt like this would give me more of a focus because the agendas are focused, the purpose is really focused, and that's basically my reason for joining. I walk around a lot, so I see everything, and so I thought that a lot of times it's helpful to have more scrutiny on the projects, especially as our resources get smaller and smaller every year.
All good points, and I appreciate that. So welcome to the board.
Thank
If
you.
tonight we only have one piece of one item that's on the agenda, so if you wanted to abstain from voting on it because this is you're new here and we're ending that particular item, that's perfectly fine. So with that in mind, we now move to the next phase, which is a public hearing on PB 2006-54 Elting, a new residential construction site plan in the zoning district of R2. So I would like to get a motion to reopen the public hearing.
I think it's still open, technically.
It's technically still open, Rick?
Yeah,
Okay. So I guess then we will just go right into a continuation of that public hearing for the site plan. So we received a couple of new pieces of information from Dr. Elizabeth Lee and Dr. Will K. Yee, showing evidence of how students resolve parking issues, and that they are hoping that they're saying that it reinforces their concern that the design of the driveway and garage will make difficult parking. This will increase the likelihood that there will be vehicles in the driveway, further hindering emergency access. And then they say in the future, buildings have been converted to student housing and there are more cars in the driveway obstructing the access of emergency vehicles. So they did also send some photographs, which we placed in the file, which everyone had access to. want to thank them very much for their contribution. I do try to answer as many of the emails that are sent as possible. Unfortunately, this was not given with an email address, so I was not able to respond. But we do appreciate the time that was put in on that. The next item that we received was from Misha Harnick. If everyone got that, the more salient points are discussion of water runoff, narrow driveway, parking, emergency vehicle access. Then there was a question asked about the placement of it close to the lot lines. Also talked about the positioning of the building. There were some there were pieces of information in there that related to the process and the aesthetics of the building. I did communicate with with Misha Harnick, and I sent an email back, and we had a little discussion by email of this, and we do appreciate you her sending in that information. Did everyone get a copy of both of those pieces?
Yeah, I did.
Should have been in your packet.
Yep.
Good. So before we bring people on for the public hearing, because I'm sure there will be people who have some information that they want to share, I did go to the site with both Blue and with Corey. And with Blue, he did create a letter, which I think I sent to each of you, that simply says, after our field meeting regarding the drainage issues of 54 Elting, the village DPW went and shot some grades along the center line of the road, confirming there is a crest of 2 inches to 4 inches in the roadway. Because in my opinion, it would take a serious storm event in order for runoff to affect properties on the west side of the street. However, if you would like to look into this issue any further, I would recommend having the engineer. So I appreciate that from Blue, getting that piece of information to us. And that's part of the communication that I sent to you folks earlier by email, that he had shot the center lines and had discussed the stormwater runoff in that area. Next, we had a meeting with Corey, and I both went out there and we looked at a number of different aspects. The placement of the fire hydrant in proximity to the location of the building. We also looked at other parts of it, and he says that he had some questions about the common driveway width. He asked for clarification on that, which I think we have done. Easement, which we have also spoken about with the applicant to make sure there's an easement. And required number of parking spaces required by code should be on the drawing, and the spaces should be marked. And then one of the issues he did not understand was shadow parking. Is everyone clear on shadow parking? Do you know what that means?
No, I could use a refresher.
Rick will probably school me a little bit after I go off on this, but shadow parking is a way for the village to dedicate space for future parking if it is needed, which would also prevent us from creating parking lots at each of the houses or each of the respective prospective properties. And these would only be activated if the parking were needed and observed by the applicant, or if the parking were needed and mandated by the village. Rick, how did I do?
You did very well. And the last part is probably the reason to have bank parking is that there are some, and this happens in other jurisdictions as well. There are certain regulations that mandate a certain amount of parking. But many times, in the opinion of the planning board, that much parking isn't really required, but you can't change the parking requirements. So the way to sort of balance that environmental issue is to say, all right, you need to be providing this much parking. But we only think presently you need this, less than that. And so that's what's designated as parking, but the other area has to be maintained and open to be ready to put parking in case the needs do arise that require additional parking.
So that is what shadow parking is. It doesn't mean that we are mandating at this time parking be available, but that we are mandating that they plan for it, should it be needed. So, Alana, do you have anyone that would like to speak to the issue on social media that's watching?
No one's on the YouTube chat, but Taylor Davis is on the call. If he has anything else he wants to share, he's back as the neighbor representative.
Right. I just wanted to see if we could clear the social media first, but
yeah, there's nothing. Yeah.
Okay. So with that in mind, Mr. Davis, feel free to let's see, get him unmuted, and feel free if you have any further comments for the public hearing.
Oh, thanks, John. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Thanks, Alana. Yes, I suppose I am back again. We are, the street has kind of nominated me to at least address some of the kind of greater concerns that we have. And I think, first of all, just in this last month, I just want to thank all of you on the planning board, because we kind of gave us more insight into how hard you guys work, and you gave us, an idea of the kind of, I guess, realm that you're working in, and that you're doing your due diligence. And we really appreciate that. I know it's a volunteer for most of you, and just thanks for that. And then thanks to all the neighbors on our street who have relayed, we've conversed about this over the last month, and just it's great to see the neighbors come together on things, and if it's something we're trying to maybe stop, but it's good to have that. So thanks to all the neighbors for submitting comments and sharing all of that. I think from my understanding, and I haven't heard from you guys other than what you just said about the 2-inch crest on the middle of the roadway and some shadow parking. Sounds like that's the verdict. From what I've learned and what we understand is that the planning board, you guys are going to operate within the code that's there. Your job is to interpret that and then make a decision on whether it's outside of that or ask that those things be fixed. So, in all essence, I think, our grievance against the property or against this proposed development, your hands are tied at some point. We respect that. There is something that keeps coming up in all of this, and it came up in 2015 when this project was initially proposed. Basically, it's the same thing, and that was the idea of character of a street or a village or property, so I'm going to pose this question now, and I would love to hear you guys' answer to it, but when I'm done, and that is, how do you define character, right? What is character to you? Is it just you guys' opinion on what character is? Is that the code, I guess, that's described? And so I'm curious what that means to you. I have seen, John, you even, I think, put it in one of the emails back to us that, surrounding the character of the development. We heard that Rich in the last call, the developer, mentioned that his preference is to maximize density in the village. That means, that he was saying that he thinks that the lots on Elting are too big, all of them. And, so does that mean we should go cut up ours too and put as many houses as possible? Maybe. Is that moving towards a better character? I don't know. But ultimately, it spawned a question to me. And we've been conversating about it with the neighbors, and that is like, what makes a place special? We all moved here because of this street's character. We moved here. I moved here in what, 2009? 2009. Both of my children are born in this house on this street. We've decided to invest in staying here because we love this street. You know, Alan Ross, the architect, just moved in last year. He loves the street. Why did he move there? Because he loves the street. Why did Rich move here? Because he loves the street, and Helen does. And John, I met actually John today. He loves the street too. 56 Elting was lived in by the founders. This house that I'm in was built in the 1800s, and I have a picture of it with a horse and buggy and the same trees as Spriggs in the front yard. To me, like, you know, is that character? I don't know. Let's look at what is the character of this current project that's being proposed. It's smaller than all the lot sizes. It's a smaller house. It's absolutely out of character than any other house on the street, or out of size relates. It's a larger carriage house. If you're looking at just carriage houses on houses, it's a larger one than any other one on the street. Is that a character deviation? It has plans for a second-story deck. There's no other house around here with a second-story deck. It also presents, I think the biggest challenge for us, John, and to the board is not what Mr. Stephens and his son plan to do with the property. I think they have pure intent. They want to live. He wants his son to live in the property. We met today. He's a musician like me. We love, I'd be happy to have him as a neighbor. We don't want any ill blood. What happens when he sells that property? What happens then? How do we prevent future character infringements, even if we can't stop this one? And that to me is what you're talking about, restricting larger driveways, not having decks, no more shadow parking available, maybe no tree removal, maybe planting trees, maybe making a beautification effort. Those are things that attribute or contribute to a character of a house. So I'll leave on this, and that is that in 2015, when this plan was initially proposed by the developer to the planning board, I was there, and we were all there. And Maurice, who's no longer with us, said point blank that this proposed development was out of character for the street and the neighborhood. Clearly, hands down, Mr. Stephens retracted the proposal, as he corrected last time. But that was stated. So this is basically 5 years later. It is the exact same thing. New house built, new 56, and now we're about to build third property that was a character infringement or not with the character. Why is it now with the character? What can we do to propose or put things in place that protect the character for the future? Does that mean we all have to join the planning board? Does it mean we all have to propose something to the village board? Help us out. How do we go from here?
Hi, I'm Kristen. I'm Taylor's wife. I just want to interject one last thing. We know that the town of New Paltz or the village of New Paltz did a climate vulnerability study, and they got a full assessment. And, look, it's a predictive assessment. We don't know for sure what's going to happen in the future, but it does say that by 2100, there would be number of extreme precipitation events could nearly double. And I understand if the road is up to the code it's supposed to be up to, that's great. But sometimes reality doesn't necessarily fit into the tidy box of check off all these marks and did we put enough crest on the road? We are concerned for our property. Just flooding and extreme weather events are becoming more common, at least seemingly. And I just don't know what we can do as being across the street neighbors to protect ourselves with future development right across the street having an adverse effect on our own property. That's all.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. No, we appreciate it. Would any member of the board like to address the comments that were made?
I'm new, but I did look at all of the letters and the documents, and I would be uncomfortable signing something that says that any project right now complies with the master plan, because having been part of several, of the second revision, I think there have been 3 attempted revisions of the master plan. And so, but none of them were adopted. So you're working off a master plan from 1994. And my feeling is that if we had a master plan that actually addressed the needs of, the individual streets, we would have some sort of stipulation on a property like this, because of the fact that you still have so many houses there with character. If you look at Tricor, that's already been, built up in as many spaces in between as people could get so far. So I think that's something. And the other thing I thought of was, in his response, he says that originally he just wanted to make a garage with a small living quarters on top. And if that's something that's smaller and less objectionable than the single family home, maybe there would be a way to offer him that, if that would satisfy both sides of it.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Just specifically related to what Taylor was asking about how to affect these changes and make it so there were these commissions and boards had more power to determine the character of neighborhoods. I think the discussion before the village board now about creating an architectural review board is really the way that New Paltz is going to make that happen. And so that was something that was discussed when I was on the HPC, and we were working towards that for a long time. And I think that people just need to let the village board know that that's something that they want to see and is a priority for them. I'd certainly be interested as a member of the planning board now in having that architectural review board as well.
Yeah, and just to chime in, Taylor, it's really difficult. I sometimes feel on this board, you're between a rock and a hard place, because we do have our own sort of opinions about aesthetics, and unfortunately we're sometimes limited to operate under the jurisdiction that we do have, which is upholding the code. So I understand, and I agree with Zach tremendously, where I wish that there was another party that could sort of step in and talk about architectural integrity and just the overall aesthetic of the village. So yeah, I'm in agreement with Zach.
Thank you. Mr. Golden.
Hey, John, if I might, and Rick is here, going specifically to what the planning board does, and you did a great job of summarizing it. And you say, with this information, which you outlined, the applicant is in compliance with the code and regulations. I can see no reason why the application should not be approved based upon the analysis. And Rick, I've gone through a lot of site plan reviews and walked the properties over the years for different projects. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, but we can't get into the aesthetics. We can't get into the character of the street. We have to all we can do as the planning board say, yes, you have complied with the code and the regulations. I mean, I don't know how much personal opinions we can have. I like to use the example, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Some people like open space. I might like to see a building by Frank Lloyd Wright. So could you tell me, are we allowed to, hold up projects based upon our personal opinions?
Well, it's both the question asked by Mr. Davis, as well as your question, Dennis. They're complex questions, and there's no easy answer to it under the law. Clearly, for planning boards, there, at least in Village of New Paltz and most other places, there is no sort of standard that says, well, if the planning board finds that it's not in character of the neighborhood, then it can be denied, right? You don't have that kind of leeway. However, aesthetics is part of the mix of things that planning boards are supposed to consider when they're looking at a site plan. If you look at the finding statement of this proposed resolution, or which really parrots 212-23D, which talks about standards for site plan approval in the code, it talks about what it is, and it talks about traffic, and it talks about aesthetics and landscaping and impact on surrounding development. So those types of issues are relevant, but it isn't something that the board can say, well, we think it's out of character with the existing neighborhood and therefore we can deny it.
Okay.
There's other corresponding rights that an applicant has that says that if they comply with various aspects of this, they have a right to go ahead and use it, because it's a right that the Board of Trustees has said through the code that it's an as of right to go ahead and have this kind of development in this neighborhood. So although the planning board has some ability to modify something more or less around the edges, they can't just say, well, aesthetically, I don't like it and therefore it can be denied. It's much more complex than that. The character of the neighborhood is a very important concept when it comes to variances. That's a specific statutory standard that's set forth that you will hear when ZBAs address variances as to whether or not a variance from the code would cause a change in the character of the neighborhood, except for use variances. That's not also a way that it automatically defeats it, but it's more relevant there than it is in the planning board. But aesthetics, Dennis, is something that you do consider. But it's also, I think, and I'll end on this note, is even considering the aesthetics and a character in the neighborhood, a character of the neighborhood is not something that is usually static, right? A character of the neighborhood is something that has developed over time and theoretically continues to develop over time. So although, and that's why it's difficult to say something simply out of character when somebody has a right to do some development within there, is that there are some things that are going to be starkly that it is so out of character that there is a real issue with it. And other times it's out of the character now, but maybe over the course of years, the architecture and placement of homes, whether they be close to the roadway or further back, the height of homes, things like that are character of the neighborhood traditionally. But those neighborhoods change over time. You know, people start to put additions on their homes that may increase the size. And over time, that changes the character of the neighborhood. So it's a very difficult analysis to do. I appreciate that people like to keep the character of the neighborhood somewhat the same, or to have it done in more incremental movements. But it's something that aesthetics is allowed, but there's not some sort of switch that says, well, if it's out of character, we get to deny it. They don't have that kind of leeway on the planning board.
Thank you. I want to note some comments from social media, if I may, please. From an Alan JR, following up on the comments, what does the planning board think is the best way for the quality of the town's built environment to be maintained and improved? Simply from my standpoint and experience, we as a planning board, because of our charge and restrictions, don't have the latitude of creating a method for maintaining the built environment and of the village. He says that he thinks Zach's comments make a lot of sense, and that I think is a fine point, in that a commission that would provide directions, guidelines, and would have greater authority on mandating the look of a particular area, much as Rhinebeck and some of the other villages have, is probably the way that could be done. Said, what would it take to change the zoning laws to prevent developing any more small lots on Elting, from Elizabeth Lee. That's something that you'll have to get in touch with the village board, people like Mr. Murray, and discuss that with him. Neil Bettis says could always refer to Historic Preservation Commission for their thoughts, even though it isn't required. The HPC does not have any jurisdiction in this area, so there's really nothing that we can do there.
John, if I might, I wanted to add this, I forgot, and it's to Zach's point as well, and it's to this commenter. And that is that you can have a board. I mean, the HPC has that kind of quality of character of a neighborhood and quality of design specifically, but their jurisdiction is limited to certain neighborhoods that are designated. And it can't just be imported generally throughout the village. But the ARB, as Zach had pointed out, is in fact, that's the purpose of an ARB. In some jurisdictions, it's the planning board that also acts as an architectural review board. They simply put up one hat on and switch it over to the other hat when they're doing their architectural review board reviews. Or it's a separate board. Different jurisdictions deal with it differently, but that is one that is specifically charged with the types of elements of window fenestration, peaks, how close it is to a particular roadway, in addition to just the general setbacks, whether the porch is out of character with the types of porches that are meant for that neighborhood, or even consistent with the architecture of the house. So a board can be charged with those more somewhat subjective viewpoints, but this board doesn't have those responsibilities or even powers at this time.
Right, and I think one of the key words there is subjective, and so it's going to take a board that has some very stringent qualifications or guidelines that would be required for homeowners and home builders to comply with. But again, we don't have that in the village, so our job is, the planning board is not involved. That question then from Neil Bettis, why have a comprehensive plan, old or new, if it isn't followed? What we're finding out is that we have a comprehensive master plan, and it has been found that this particular application does comply.
Are you
So,
talking about the master plan from 1994?
One moment, please. So what we have here is one of the difficulties that often comes before planning boards is that our role is to make sure that the plans and that the projects comply with the rules, regulations that we have available and that are present right now and are in effect right now, and using those guidelines and our guidance from other aspects and comments that we get, we make a decision based on all of those. If we want to create another commission, or we want to create another board to mandate certain appearances, that's out of our purview, and that might be a way to maintain a look that is not incongruent with the surrounding neighborhood. But unfortunately, or fortunately, that just is something that we are going to be able to take up and run with, especially with the applications that are before us now. And Rachel, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You did have something that you wanted to add in, is that correct?
Yes. Well, it goes to my previous question about the master plan, because I was wondering whether a new master plan had been passed since 1994. Because if it hasn't, then I think that's something to focus on and not something to necessarily refer to something as being in compliance with, because it's so old that it couldn't possibly reflect the changes that have happened and the expectations that people have now.
Thank you. One of the issues that we have, and then Rick will probably answer this more correctly, is that we cannot make up law. We have to work within the laws and the guidelines that are passed. I cannot, and we cannot as a board say we do not like the comprehensive master plan, therefore we're going to hold a particular applicant to a different standard than another one who has complied with the comprehensive master plan. The true tale is to change the master plan, not to have each board decide that it has its own interpretation of the master plan. Rick, you were going to say?
Yeah, first of all, it is the 1994 master plan or comprehensive plan that is in effect in the village. There was some movement many years later to modify that, and there has been more discussion in the last few years to also move in that direction.
No.
But there's been no modification to that 1994 plan. To John's point, the code is what largely the board has to follow. And it has to be assumed by this board that the regulations that the Board of Trustees has followed, as passed rather, are in compliance with the comprehensive plan. Because it is not, those laws are illegal. And so it's not up to this board to sit in judgment on trying to reconcile the zoning code and the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is something that is largely aspirational. It has various goals to be attended to and achieve and trying to achieve, but it's not a zoning code. It's but to the extent that someone wants to challenge that the laws are inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, they would have to do so. And a court then would decide whether or not it was truly in conflict with the comprehensive plan, or whether or not it simply can be reconciled given the different and sometimes competing goals and aspirations that are listed in the comprehensive plan.
Long story short is it's out of our ability to do. Yes, Mr. Davis.
Sorry, can I ask a quick question? Who controls the master plan? Is that the village board?
Yes. They're the one.
So
It's a process. Ultimately, it's the village board because they pass it by way of a local law. But it's a process of coming to a new or amended, in this case, amended comprehensive plan that involves public input. It requires at least 2 public hearings. And eventually a board would go ahead and adopt that, but the only board that can adopt it is the Board of Trustees.
Gotcha. Because that came up in 2015 when we were looking at this initial proposal, and Tim Rogers said that they were working on the master plan. That's 5 years later. So apparently that work is still in progress. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Hey, John, could I just throw in one thing, because you and Rick did a great job of explaining things. And my point is to all the people who have sent in letters who live on Elton Avenue and have expressed that the planning board, in essence, they ask us that we reject not only this, but other projects that's come up. And both you and Rick have outlined that it's not that we're not compassionate to their needs or wants, but we just don't have it in our jurisdiction to just do something based upon architectural design or things that are not, as long as it conforms to the code and the zoning, that's pretty much all we can deal with. As Rick rightly brought out, we do have some flexibility if we think something is terribly out of character that we can step in, but it's not, even if we were in total agreement, we don't have the right to deny something just based upon its aesthetics. And I just hope, people understand that and don't say, oh, the planning board, they shouldn't have passed this. It's out of our hands.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Dennis. Okay, so there are no other comments that are coming on social media. So at this point, I would like to get a motion to close the public hearing.
So motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There wasn't a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. May we please have a second of that motion?
Second.
Okay.
Could I ask
Thank
one
you, Beth.
question? I'm
We're now actually have moved to closing the public hearing. Unfortunately, we've kind of passed that point. So,
John,
yes.
John, I think Rachel has a question. It'd be nature of discussion on that motion. So.
Oh, okay. Please go right ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I noticed in some of the reading that I did that one of the planning board members asked for a detailed breakdown of the dimensions of impermeable surfaces and the location of the trees. Was that request something that the applicant was going to honor, or did they? I didn't notice it in the resolution, so I was wondering if that was.
Yeah, I was hoping we could discuss that as well. I thought maybe after the public comment, then that would come up.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that when we go into the application review.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's quite all right. So we've got a second. So all in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
All right. And so the ayes have it. So the public hearing is closed. We are now moving on to an application review. So motion to open the application review for PB 2006-54 Elting.
You don't need a motion for that, John.
Motion? Okay, well, let's move right into the application review. So Rachel, would you please restate your question regarding
Yes. I noticed in the reading that one of the planning board members had requested a detailed breakdown of the dimensions of the impermeable surfaces, locations of the tree. And I was wondering if the applicant was going to provide that, or if they had provided it, or.
The applicant had previously provided a measurement of the impermeable surfaces. The code requires that it be under 30%, and I believe, and the applicant can correct me if I'm wrong, that the impermeable surfaces were, was it 22, 23%? Is that correct? Mr.
Actually, can you hear me?
Yes.
Actually, it came out to 20%.
Okay.
That's taken into account the driveway, the house, the parking area.
Okay. Also, in discussions with the applicant, there was no intention to remove the trees that are in front, and to not remove the trees that are in that area that borders between him and the property to the is that to the west, I believe?
Yeah, there's a big line of trees there.
Right. And from the time that we were there and discussing it, the applicant did not, well, he actually said that he was going to keep the trees that are in the front and on the side. So that was something that we received as insurance that it's going to happen. So that was addressed. Any other issues that we need to discuss related to
John?
the application.
John, on that point,
Yes.
whenever the planning board believes that there's something that has been represented that will occur that's important to the underlying approval, such as whether or not trees remain or may be taken out, it's always best to have a condition in the resolution to that effect. Not that you don't believe the present applicant that they won't live up to their word, but that this resolution and the conditions of it, run with the approval, including subsequent owners, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And so if in fact the location of those trees and them remaining where they are part of the decision-making process that causes you to approve it, then that usually should be put in as a condition.
Shouldn't there be a reason to remove the trees or not remove them?
Well, I
The
believe
reason usually with respect to trees, and I'll let Zach weigh in, but just as a general comment, is that the board has the ability to go ahead and as part of their site plan, believe whether or not it's something that will affect the surrounding property. And that's part of their findings is, the landscaping involved, impact on surrounding development is part of what they're supposed to take into consideration. So if having trees stay where they are part of that consideration, they say, yes, that's part of why I want to approve it, is that the trees are there, and I may not want to approve it or want something else if the trees are going to be removed tomorrow. And so they have the ability to do that, and they have the ability to condition their approval on that. But go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think anyone who's visited the site knows how important that line of trees is to both the properties, and the code pretty clearly states that you cannot remove trees in a buffer zone in that setback area without planning board, without it being part of the site plan and the planning board approving that site plan. So it's very important to me to get that as part of the resolution that we pass.
Can I answer to that? The tree commission did come along and take a look at that. There were trees removed back in 2017. They were removed with the knowledge of a member of the street who serves on the tree commission. The tree commission was approached. All of the current existing trees are beyond the 25-foot road setback that the tree commission looks at. So at this point, those trees are not protected by that tree commission. It's my intention to keep them there because I like them, because I have a substantial investment, because I live there. But should something happen to one of those trees, should Central Hudson come in and deny me a permit to bury my electric lines? Let me tell you that when I built 58, I wanted to bury the electric lines because I think they're unsightly in the village. Having all those aerial electric lines, I think, are awful. The people a member on the street, actually, from the tree commission, stopped me from doing that by saying we couldn't take a tree down that would have made it possible to have buried the line, because burying the line would kill the tree.
Okay.
If it's I don't know what kind of restriction you're going to put on the trees. My intention is, I have no intention of taking those trees down.
Rich, I believe that what they want us to do is to place something in there, the condition that states your intention to not remove the trees except in cases mandated by Central Hudson, health of the tree, and other reasonable aspects. Because that would, of course, go with the property and not just with you. So that if the next property owner decided that they wanted a clear view of the house next door, that would prevent them from doing that, as you understand. So I guess what we need to figure out is what's a reasonable way to restrict the removal of the trees that would also comply not only with the wishes of your neighbors, but also with your stated intention to not remove those trees. And that is the trick.
Well, I think it would be very helpful if the site plan showed the trees and showed which trees were going to have to be removed.
At this point, all the trees that I intend to remove are gone. It would only be if the village came in for some reason and wanted a tree down, or if a tree became diseased and had to come down, or if Central Hudson refused to put in the electric because of those trees. I have to get electric into the site, obviously. The village gave me permits for the water line and the sewer line. They required one of the trees to be removed at that time. That's why that was done. In clear daylight, with a village permit, people on the street saw this happen. I removed a tree in order to put in the water and sewer line. I do not intend to take down anything else. I like the trees. I've had this argument several times with myself about, should I just take them all down now while I can, or should I wait and do them later? And I've decided I like the trees there. I like them there. I think they add to the value of my property. I think they add to the value of my son's property. I have no intention of taking them down, but am I willing to accept a restriction that says you can't take them down? Why? It's not because of water runoff. It's not because I would like to know the reason why I have to be restricted. That's all. I think I deserve a reason to be restricted other than we don't like your trees or we like your trees.
Well, Rick, maybe you can tell me if this part of the code applies, but it pretty clearly states in the tree removal section of the general legislation that in required buffers, no trees may be removed, damaged, destroyed, or endangered except as authorized by a duly issued building permit in compliance with the approved site plan. So it seems like those trees are in the required buffer.
Zach, I try not to have interpretations on the fly on
Sorry.
specific. No, it's not wrong for you to ask me, but sometimes it's more complicated than that. And it involves putting that in context with other provisions of the code as to whether or not it actually be applicable. But my point is separate and apart from any tree regulation provision in the code, which may change from time to time.
Mm.
If these trees are important for your site plan review, and I'll tell you in a second, I'll read to you what you're allowed to do. It's similar to what I was reading previously, talking about the functions of the planning board. Then you have the right to require that. If those trees are important to your analysis and to the development that you want to approve, then you do have the authority to do that. And I would suggest that you do it based upon that authority rather than on some tree regulation requirement in the code.
Would you please repeat that?
The standard?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to read, John.
Okay.
So if you look at section 212-23D1 in the code, it reads in part of the kinds of things that you are supposed to take into consideration in your review of site plans and the standards by which you are bound. Parking shall be reviewed to ensure there's no unreasonable interference with traffic on surrounding streets. Conservation features, aesthetics, landscaping, and impact on surrounding development, as well as on the entire village, shall be part of the planning board review.
So for those of us who are slow, could you go over that one more time, please?
Sure. In addition to making sure that it conforms to the comprehensive master plan, and other provisions of the New Falls Code, it says traffic flow, circulation, and parking shall be reviewed. This is shall be reviewed by the planning board in connection with the site plan approval to ensure that there is no unreasonable interference with traffic on surrounding streets. conservation features, aesthetics, landscaping, and impact on surrounding development, as well as on the entire village, shall be part of the planning board review. So you are obligated to look at these things, such as the conservation features, aesthetics, landscaping, and the impact on surrounding development. And what my advice to you is that in conformance with those mandated planning board review standards that you have to review and consider for any site plan, if you believe that these trees, whether that be part of a conservation feature or landscaping or the impact on surrounding development, if you believe that these trees are important to remain, you have the right to go ahead and mandate that they remain.
Okay. Okay. So with that in mind, what do other members of the board think and believe on the matter of the trees, the tree removals, but keeping that, of course, in context of the conservation review that we have some purview over?
If I have drafted something quick, because I mean, to go ahead and require the applicant to go back and identify specific trees would obviously delay this a month, and I'm not sure that it's necessary on such a discrete issue. But what I suggest as a new condition, it would be new condition number 6, and put the now condition number 6 to 7. But the condition would read, whatever you want me to say, but this is just some suggested language. There shall be no removal of trees on the property except for dead, dying, or diseased trees, or if necessary, for installation of utilities. And that would cover both the O&R as well as water and sewer things.
Okay.
You want me to read it again? I can read it again.
Read it one more time, and then I'd like to have each member of the board give that some thought before we make a decision on that. So Rick, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm just trying to modify it slightly to sound a little better. There shall be no removal of existing trees on the property except for dead, dying, or diseased trees, or, if necessary, for installation of utilities.
Okay.
So John, I think at this point, we've kind of talked obviously last month, and then we've heard comments from the community. We've sort of reached the point where we've realized that we're operating under the code. And so if we can, and if the applicant is okay with including this in the conditions, I feel like I have no other choice than kind of to move forward with that condition and kind of approve this at this point.
Okay. Zach, what are your thoughts?
Sorry. Yeah, that condition satisfies me.
Okay. Ms. Lagadka?
Well, when I looked at the property, it did look like all of the trees except the ones on the very edge of it had already been cut down. And I'm wondering whether the applicant has any plans to plant trees.
I don't know that right now. What we're really looking at is the issue of the existing trees and not what the applicant plans to do in terms of landscaping. So let's move through this particular part first before we venture outside of it. So any thoughts on the restrictions that were suggested by the attorney?
Good.
Okay.
John, if I may, part of the problem with this type of meeting is my partner is sitting in one building, I'm sitting here. I don't have any problem with this. Do you, John?
Oh, well, I mean, is tree removal now going to be part of every site process? I mean, moving forward? I mean, I just want to make sure that we're being treated fairly as property owners.
Well, I think you're being treated
What
equitably.
has to happen is that if in fact trees and the conservation or screening or other purpose of trees is important on a site plan, then the planning board can make those types of determinations and conditions on other site plans. To the extent that it's not important for that particular site plan, then they don't have to include it.
And that's yeah, that was pretty much the idea, is that when it is part of a site plan and it is important, then it is considered. When it's not part of a site plan and it isn't deemed important, then no, not considered. But you're not being singled out for trees in this, and that you're not being singled out, and that other people would not have to rise to the same standard.
Okay, what if we wanted to, and we have no plans to do this, but expand the size of the building within the building envelope, maybe, to even more conform with the usual size of houses in the neighborhood? What would be the process of going back and now dealing with the legislation you've made regarding these trees?
We got to come back and start all over again, John, if that's what happens.
From the very beginning.
Anybody has the right to come back and ask for an amended site plan approval, and the board will look at that amended site plan approval. If for some reason something has changed, you could even modify the prior conditions of the resolution. And for instance, if it was necessary to remove some trees for an addition that seemed appropriate, and the board at that time felt that it still provided the necessary conservation benefits, et cetera, then they could modify the plan.
I mean, is there any member of the board that thinks that removing trees isn't conservation?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is there any member of the board that believes that removing trees is against conservation? I mean, isn't keeping trees conservation?
It's not as simple as that. And I think, that's kind of sophomoric to ask that question of the board. I read the standard. The standard has to do with conservation values as well as impact on development. And so those are two separate items, as well as generally they're allowed to impose landscaping requirements, whether that be maintaining existing trees or ordering that new trees be planted.
Okay. So I guess the next thing we want to do is it's been determined that the sense of the board is to include this. So I would like to get a motion to include the restriction as written by the attorney in the resolution of approval.
So,
Second,
Aye.
and all in favor?
John? John?
Yes, sir.
It's not required by any means, but it has been tradition that you would read the specific conditions
Okay.
so that everybody would be aware of what they were. It's not required, but I just wanted to remind you, if you wanted to do it and you just didn't do it as an oversight, that's all I was reminding you.
It was primarily an oversight, given that you had just read it recently. My apologies there. So if you want to read that one last time, as it will be entered into the resolution of approval.
I was talking about, typically you would read all of the specific conditions. Again, you don't have to, and if you want to go through a process now where you don't read those specific conditions of a resolution.
Well, we will. This was just for the addition of that one to those.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. I thought this was
Yeah.
for the resolution itself. My
No.
apologies.
This was just for the addition of that specific restriction.
Then I apologize for the interruption.
Quite all right. Okay. So anything else that we need to look at in terms of review from the board members on this particular application in the site plan? We have received a few comments in regards to the tree removal and asking if there could be restrictions placed in terms of utilities placement. And unfortunately, Central Hudson bows to no man. So Central Hudson will tell you what is being done, or as the case was when they took down 2 of my trees in my yard, they told me what they had done. So what we can do is to place this restriction in there, and it will limit what can be done by the applicant. And then his negotiations with Central Hudson will have to be separate from this discussion. Okay, so with that in mind, we've had the public hearing and we've had the application review. We've had quite a robust discussion regarding the application itself, the trees, the location, water runoff, and have thoroughly gone over the application. So we're at that point now where there is a resolution of approval that we will be reading. Yes, Mr. Stephens.
I bring up one point that's very important to me. Did you discuss recreation fees?
Recreation fees are in here, and they are stated that the recreation fees are based on we're waiving the requirement for land reservation for the new residential unit on the site on the condition that prior to the signing of the site plan, the applicant deposit a cash.
John, if I could interrupt, I think it may be good for the record for you to actually read the finding that's in the resolution and make sure that the planning board is fine with that finding before going forward.
I'm a little bit familiar with this topic right now. Doesn't the board actually have to have a discussion that says, I will pay I'm going to be required to pay the recreation fee? I intend to pay it. That's not the argument. I want to make sure it's done correctly.
The board has to make certain findings. Those findings are actually set forth in the proposed resolution under findings.
Oh, okay.
And that's what I'm asking John to go ahead and read. When they do that, that will establish the basis for them to require recreation fees, and they have to be paid in accordance, as you know, with the village code resolution dealing with it.
I made an assumption, and you know what happens when you assume. I'm sorry.
Okay, with that, let's go on to the resolution of approval, site plan for 54 Elting Avenue. Richard Steffens, application number PB 2006. Application summary is that Rich Steffens, herein after applicant, proposed to construct a 24 by 32 foot one family dwelling that is 2 stories with a 1-car garage on the lower level and 1 10 by 20 foot parking space at the rear of the building. The applicant also proposes a 10 foot by 20 foot deck off the main 2nd floor and a 10 by 20 foot shadow parking area in front of the dwelling. Then it gives an identification of the property where it is on the tax map. We then have an identification of the plans and submittals, including the application dated 7/15/20, a site plan that is undated rather, excuse me, front elevation undated, top main floor undated, proposed lower level floor undated. Application was filed on June 16, 2020. Planning board determined that the state Seeker Act, the application was a type 2 action requiring no further environmental review. Public hearing notice was placed. Application's been before the UCPB, which declared that there is no county impact. So findings. The planning board has found that the site plan conforms to the village's adopted comprehensive master plan and village code. There will be no unreasonable interference with traffic on surrounding streets, and the site plan includes adequate stormwater detention facilities. The planning board has reviewed conservation features, aesthetic landscaping, and impact on surrounding development and the entire village in making this determination of approval. The planning board further finds that 1, the village has a need for public parkland and recreational facilities, including improvement of existing recreation areas. 2, the site presents a proper case for requiring a park or parks suitably located or recreational purposes, as it adds a new residential unit and will contribute to such need. And 3, suitable parks or recreation areas of adequate size to meet this requirement cannot be located on the site, especially given the village code 21223 J2C provides that parks, playgrounds, or recreation areas shall be at least 21,780 square feet. Accordingly, Planning Board hereby waives the requirement of land reservation for the new residential unit on the site on the condition that prior to the signing of the site plan, the applicant deposit a cash payment in lieu of land reservation with the village clerk pursuant to the village code in the amount set by resolution of the Board of Trustees for a residential unit of this size, less a credit in the amount of $1,000 for money donated in lieu of parkland under the 2017 subdivision plat approval involving this property. Resolution of approval. Therefore, Planning Board of the Village of New Paltz, New York, hereby resolves to issue a site plan approval to the application of Richard Steffens, but only as specifically set forth on the plans as identified above, or as subsequently revised in accordance with this resolution and further condition as set forth below. The Planning Board Chair is hereby authorized to sign such plans and other documents. Specific conditions. Number 1, prior to the signing of the site plan shall be revised to remove what appears to be the word park, in quotation marks, from the rear of the shared drive, as such incorrectly indicates that parking is proposed in the shared driveway, and to clearly delineate the bounds of the improved driveway, 12 feet, and the related right-of-way, 25 feet. Number 2, prior to the signing of the site plan, the applicant shall submit proof of filing with the Ulster County Clerk of the driveway easement referenced in the 2017 subdivision approval, PB 1728, in such form as is acceptable to the Planning Board attorney. Number 3, prior to the signing of the site plan, the applicant shall add a bulk table showing the bulk requirements, the proposed requirements, and the proposed lot coverage calculation therein shall include the driveway and parking areas. Number 4, one of the 3 required parking spaces is being approved as a shadow parking space that shall not be constructed until the need for additional parking spaces arises. The need can be recognized by the applicant or determined by the building inspector based upon vehicle usage at the property. The shadow parking area shall be clearly delineated with sunken metal rods with a cap that is visible above the ground, placed at the 4 corners of the space. Prior to the signing of the site plan shall be revised to show the dimensions of the shadow parking area, 10 by 20 feet, in the front of the building, and the dimensions of the parking space inside the garage to the satisfaction of the building inspector. Now, this next one is number 6, and Rick, if you want to insert this as number 6 and then making the current number 6 7?
Correct. So 6 would read, there shall be no removal of existing trees on the property except for dead, dying, or diseased trees, or, if necessary, for the installation of utilities.
Number 7, prior to the signing of the site plan, the applicant shall deposit a cash payment in lieu of land reservation with the village clerk pursuant to the village code in the amount set by resolution of the Board of Trustees for a 1,536 square foot dwelling, less a $1,000 credit for money donated in lieu of parkland under the 2017 subdivision plat approval involving this property. General conditions, a resolution of approval is conditioned upon the applicant submitting all the necessary final copies of the plans, reports, and documents to the Village of New Paltz building inspector. The resolution of approval is further conditioned upon all other approvals that are needed by operation of federal, state, or local laws and regulations, whether or not noted above in the specific conditions as revolutions, including and but not limited to Army Corps of Engineers, New York State, DEC, State Department of Transportation, Department of Health, Ulster County Department of Health, Village of New Paltz Board of Trustees, in compliance with the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code. The site plan as approved by the Planning Board shall be binding upon the applicant and any subsequent owner. Any changes from the approved plan shall require resubmission and reapproval by the Planning Board. No deviation from the plans, reports, or other documents that form the basis for this approval are effective unless and until an amendment to this resolution is secured from the planning board in writing. The village may stop work on the project or revoke a building permit or withhold a certificate of occupancy and or seek any other additional reliefs as authorized by law if any terms or conditions of this resolution is violated. No other construction or other site improvements have been initiated at this site during 12-month period following the site plan approval. The approved plan shall require resubmission and reapproval by the planning board. All fees regarding this application must be paid in full, including all application fees, other fees required by the village, the fees of the planning board consultants, including engineering, planning, and legal. Any bonds necessary for the performance of this work shall be in such form and amounts as required by the village board of trustees. That is it. So at this point, we are going to take a vote on the approval of this application. So,
John, you should do a roll call for this. Or I
yes,
can do it, but
actually, Alana, why don't you do a roll call for this, because we are all little squares on the screen.
yeah. And then so before I do, I guess you can make a motion to, and then once you do that, then I can do a roll call.
So I would like to make a motion to approve this application EB 2006.
So motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. For the all in favor and all opposed, there will be a roll call vote by the secretary of the planning board. Alana, if you would please go ahead.
Okay. John,
I approve. Aye.
Dennis,
Approve.
Zach,
Approve.
Raquel,
Aye.
and Rachel.
It was suggested that I abstain.
Yeah,
Well,
you
it's
can.
not- It's not suggested. It's just if you would like to, that's okay. Don't feel pressured to make a decision based on one meeting. Was really my intention.
Oh, okay. Well, I know. I really appreciate that. I think at this point, it hardly matters which way I vote anyhow.
What's your conscience?
Well, the only difficulty I have with it is that the master plan discrepancy, but then again, there are all these conditions in the approval. So I feel based on what everyone else is saying that I'd be obligated to approve, to say yes.
No obligations at all.
But as far as my conscience goes, I don't know. I mean, the entire street is upset with it. And I feel like it's very difficult to distinguish between, say, character and purpose. And, I don't know how subjective the difference is between aluminum siding and old stone, but I don't know. I'm going to abstain because I still feel like I want to get a better handle on what I'm doing.
Thank you. So the approval passed with 4 approving and 1 abstaining.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. So that completes the process for the business agenda tonight for the application review. So the next motion is a motion to adjourn.
So motion.
So motion.
Wow. A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So this meeting.
Hey, John, I abstain.
You abstain?
Abstain from.
Okay.
Have a good night. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll look forward to seeing you again.